Hi everyone, thanks for joining me for a new Allan Holdsworth lesson video. Today we're going to do Home, which is a song that it's one of my favorite tunes, but I've been putting it off for a long time because there are so many chords in it, and also it's pretty challenging. But in many ways, it's actually almost like the quintessential Allan Holdsworth song. And the reason why I say that is for a number of reasons. First of all, I think the song is beautiful. It's got a lot of really cool harmonic choices. It also has a lot of really difficult and stretchy chords. It has a lot of chords just unique to the song. Classic sort of deceptive Allan Holdsworth modulations, up a half step, down a half step, where you can't really tell unless you kind of are playing the song or learning it. It also dips into many different scales. Not only does it primarily use chords from the major scale, but you also have elements of Melodic Minor and the Diminished scale. You even have a little bit of that added flat 6 scale that I talked about in Funnels. So this just has everything, and even every part doesn't repeat the same way, but there's a lot of variations to some of the parts that when they come back they're the same but a little bit different. So to me this song really has everything, and because it's so complicated and there's so many chords, that I think I'm going to gear this mostly just more advanced players, so I'm not going to really spend a lot of time talking about specific chords and maybe different ways of playing them. I'm just going to go through the whole thing as fast as I can because I don't know how long the lesson would be if I try to do all these little details in the song. Also, I'm going to break this down into about 6 different sections. The first 3 are really the most important. I'm going to consider it the solo intro chords, and then the intro, the full band intro, and then the next part, which is kind of like the, it's really the solo chords. Those chords are what Allan's actually soloing over. But if you get those first 3 parts down, all the rest of the parts are going to be much easier because they're all just variations of what came before there. With some new chords here and there, but mostly little modulations or little twists and turns that might be a little bit unexpected. So I hope you can enjoy this song. It's going to be pretty challenging. So let's do it. Home. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to call the beginning of this song, like I just said before, the solo guitar chords for the intro, because this part also comes back later towards the end of the song for the swell section, but there's a little bit of a difference there. So pay attention to this section, because when I get to the swell part, I'm not going to go into detail except for the chords that are different, once again to shorten the video a little bit. Now, when Allan plays the song, he keeps his pick in his mouth, because he uses the pick for one chord. He arpeggiates one chord in this whole song, and everything else is played with the fingers. Of course, you could play it however you want. So, also another thing is that a lot of chords in these next 2 sections are really built from this kind of hand shape. It's not necessarily something that's diatonic to a key, where Allan sort of plays up and down like we've seen in other videos or other songs that I've done. But it's mostly just built on this kind of shape, whether these fingers, it's usually like a middle finger on the A string, your first finger on the string underneath it, then your third finger, and then your pinky on the top, sort of stretched out like this. Now this is more, like I said, is more like a hand shape that's being used, whether it's on the top 4 strings or the middle 4 strings with some variation. So if you're struggling with this kind of reach, these first 2 sections are going to be pretty difficult because a lot of chords are built from that kind of idea. So the first part of the song, the first chord, is this G6 chord, which you can also call an E minor 7. But Allan doesn't play it all the notes at once. He arpeggiates it in sixths. So the first part, he plays a G and an E at the same time. Then he plays this D and B at the same time. And then taps a G on top. So that right there we have that G6. Then we get that hand shape. Already started. Now I would call this an A minor with an add 11, because we have an A, a C, and an E, A minor triad here, and then we're adding in the 11, the D. And that hand shape kind of gets moved now to these middle 4 strings. Like I said, it's the same kind of idea with the hand configuration, but now the intervals are a little bit different. This I would consider a G major add 9. You have a G, a B, and a D, and then we're adding the 9 in the bass, which is another common chordal, I guess, style of Allan, by putting some of the extensions or added notes as the lowest note of the chord. So we got this so far. Then comes this next little section. Allan plays an F major triad, and then he puts down his 2 fingers here for a C sharp and a B, and then with his pinky plays a G on top. What's interesting about this chord is there's 2 ways you can view it. If you want to call D flat your root, you have I would call this a D flat 7 chord with the add sharp 11. But what's interesting is that this chord, it has the same name a flat 5 away, so you can also call this a G7 with the sharp 11, because you have a G, a B, and an F here, which is your G7, part of the G7 triad, and then you're adding in the sharp 11. So kind of interesting here. It's a very symmetrical chord, so you can think of it as 2 different ways. I'm going to call this a D7 sharp 11 chord, because this voicing kind of comes back for these 7 flat 9 chords. So I think that's how Allan's thinking of him. So F major to this D flat 7 with the add sharp 11. Then once again we've got that voicing as before. Here now I would consider this a D minor 11. I'm sorry, D minor 7, because we have a D, an F, and an A. We have our D minor, and then we have a C. So this is like a 3rd inversion D minor 7. Then what you do is you keep your 3rd finger on this note, on this A here, and all of your other fingers, your 1st, 2nd, 4th finger, move down a half step. And now we have this chord, which is the same voicing as we would play over here for that G add 9. So this is a add 9. Like that. Then we get this, what I'm going to call, because this motif happens pretty frequently throughout the song, I want to call this a add 11 motif. Allan plays an A major triad here, then uses his 2nd and 3rd finger to play this E and G sharp here. So now we have an E, an A, and a G sharp. And then his pinky plays a high B on the top. So this is like an E major triad, and we're adding in the 11. But this happens a lot where he plays an A, and then he plays a triad, and then he plays the add 11, like a 5th higher. Like that. Then you keep your pinky on that B note, and then you shift the middle note, the middle chord in here to a B7. So now you have the root on the high E string, but now you have an F sharp, an A, and a D sharp here. With your pinky on the B, you tap a C sharp with your middle finger, or any finger really, and then you play this D major 7. Now this particular voicing, Allan doesn't use it that often. It's also in road games, but this major 7 chord does get used a lot, because if you take the middle 2 notes here on the D and the G string and you move them down to the A and the D string, you get this chord, which we've seen Allan actually use a lot. Like in, I know it's the last chord in Shallow C. It's also in Funnels. It's in a lot of songs. It's one of his default like major 7 voicings. So I'll take it from the A, the E add 11, B7, tap the C sharp, D major 7. Then we get that add 11 voicing again, that motif. You play a D major, then do that same thing, but now you're playing a G add 11. And then that's really the intro solo chorus, because that's all played by itself. And then it ends with... Now this was that chord that I was saying that's in my top 10 hardest Allan voicings. There's different ways that you can play this, but like I said, just to speed up the video, I'm going to show you the way Allan plays it. It's a really crazy stretch. We have an A, a C sharp, and an E, and then we have our D. So it's really an A major with an add 11. This is where the full band starts. And now we'll talk about the second half of that intro when the full band is playing. So now when the full band starts like I said, is at that A major with the add 11. Then you go to that E major and add 9 voicing just like we did before. This then gets moved down a whole step, and I think I called this in my top 10 hardest Allan voicings. This might have been one of the honorable mentions, because this one's really crazy stretch. You've got to stretch between the 4th fret and the 10th fret here, but it's a D major add 9. Then you kind of start off with that first G6 chord, but what's interesting, you play the G and the E, and you move that up a half step. And then you still play the D and the B here, so it's really like a G sharp diminished, but overall I believe the vibe of that is really a G7 flat 9 chord. So it's a slide up, and then you tap the G again, and then you're back to A major add 9. The next part, then you actually do this little slide up. You're playing a D. You're doing these 2 minor 6 chords. You're playing a D sharp and a B, but you're sliding it up a half step to E and C, like that. Then play G major triad, F major triad, and then you move your first finger down to the E major triad, but now you play the flat 9, the F on the top. You move that flat 9 to the E, the root, like that, and you go back to G major add 9. So this is what that section sounds like to where we are right now. Whoops. The song is really tricky. Then we have that add 11 motif again, but this time now it's on from G major to D add 11 to C major 7, just like what we did in the previous section, but now modulated a whole step down. Then we do that add 11 motif again, but now we're starting on C, G add 11, and then this is where Allan sort of just plays, sometimes he plays this D up here, but I think on the record it's just a C. This is where he takes the pick out of his mouth, and then, struggling to find my pick, he takes the pick out of his mouth, and then arpeggiates this chord. And this chord, I believe, was also in my top 10 hardest Allan chords. It starts off as a D minor 7, just voiced really strange. So you have the D here, and then the flat 7, an F here, your minor 3rd, the 9 here with your first finger, and then you have a another C on the top. So actually it's more like a D minor 9. But then you take your 3rd finger and you move it down a half step afterwards, and then you have a D minor 13 kind of chord. Like that. Really tricky, and there's easier ways to play that, but like I said, I'm not going to bother with this on this video. Then Allan tucks the pick back into his first finger, and then for the rest of the song plays with the pick tucked in his first finger. Then starts with this C major add 9 to a D minor 9, very common Allan voicing. This one's a little tricky in terms of like getting your fingers to reach here, at least for me it is. And then it goes to E flat major add 9. You build that chord all the way up, so you play the meat of the chord, and then you play the 5th, the root, then you take your pinky off and you play the G on the top, the major 3rd, because you're now going to use that as a pedal point to pivot some major triads underneath it. You play an F major triad with the G on top, so it's like an F major add 9. Then you move that F major to A major, and now you have an A7, because now the G is acting as the flat 7 to A major. Then you move that A major triad to G. Now you have a full G major triad. So, oh, and there's one last chord before I mention the next part. Then Allan plays a C sharp major triad like this, but uses his pinky still on that G, so now it acts as a sharp 11 and adds sharp 11 to that C sharp major. This whole section will come back later in the song, gets repeated the same sort of way, but it's now modulated up a half step. Whoops, I bet that out of tune. That's how that part goes. That part also comes back a little bit later towards the end of the song, but it's, once again, it's a little bit different in terms of its structure. It's not always the same chord, so once again a variation of it. We'll tackle the next section, which I sort of would call the solo chords, but I'll explain that next. Alright, so for this section is really where the meat of the song is. Now I call this the solo chord section because this section is what Allan's improvising over when he solos, except the few chords in the middle are missing. There's a slight difference, slight variation to it. Then when that part comes after the solo, it's basically identical to the first section, just with a slight difference, and the ending would then veers off into what I would consider the outro section. So let's get started. The first chord of this section, I believe I was in my top 10 hardest Allan voicings. It's also a chord that's in Water on the Brain, but it's this infamous G major add 9 add sharp 11 chord. Now you could probably get away with just by playing a regular G major add 9 if you want, without adding in the sharp 11. It's just another way that you can tackle it, but this is how Allan's doing it. And that moves to a C major 13 chord. Now this can also be viewed as any of these major 13 chords can also be viewed as first inversion minor add 9 chords, but I'm considering them major 13s because the next chord that precedes it, that follows it, it's this B flat major 7 with the sharp 5 or the flat 6. So that's how I'm thinking, how Allan's thinking of the chord. So it's basically the same concept, but now you're playing the sharp 5 here. So now we've dipped into a little bit of melodic minor. And that moves to an F major 13 chord. This is the same chord as the C major 13, but now on the top 4 strings. Then we get to this little section that's diatonic to G major. We have a G major 9, which is in, this voicing is also in Water on the Brain. We have a G, a B, and an F sharp, and then we have the 9 in the bass. And this sort of follows up diatonically from G major 9 to an A minor 9. Now, it's a little tricky here, but it's, for me it's easier to just bar with my first finger and then just put my middle finger down for the B here. So we have an A, a C, a G, and then we have a B. So the 9's in the bass. C major 9, and then E flat major 13. Now I would consider that first half of that section because that modulates differently than this second half. Because then we go to an E flat minor major 7. I have a real tough time grabbing it on this guitar because of the cutaway. That moves to a C minor 7 flat 5 to a D 7 sharp 9. And that whole section is actually diatonic to E flat melodic minor. Then it goes to this B flat major 7 sus2 chord. Then it moves up almost diatonically. It's now a 7 sus2 with an add sharp 11. Back to the 7 sus2 chord. Now we have something interesting here. We have this F sharp diminished triad. But what's happening here is Allan's then taking the F sharp and moving that to F, which I believe is really belonging to F7 flat 9. And that's also when he solos, he plays the diminished scale. And if you watch his instructional video, he mentions how he usually associates the diminished scale, the half-whole diminished scale, with 7 flat 9 chords. And this song is a great example of all the different places where Allan does that. So here I would consider this an F7 flat 9. Now that whole section repeats, but once again now the modulation is different. So now instead of playing on G, that next whole first half is modulated up a half step. So now we have A flat to D flat, B major 7, B major 7 sharp 5 to F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, C sharp to E major 13. So that whole section just moved up a half step. Now this second half from what we did, we started with the E flat minor major 7, is now transposed down a half step to D minor major minor major 7. So D to B minor 7 flat 5, C sharp 7 flat 9 to A major 7 sus 2. And then once again E F diminished, but now what's happening is Allan plays the root but as an open string, like that, instead of playing the same way by moving his third finger to his first finger. So that I would consider this an E7 flat 9. Now this is where it sort of changes a little bit. So I'm going to actually cut the video here and explain this next part because it's unique to this section and also the section after the solo. Now we go to this interesting chord, which I would consider an A flat major 7 sharp 11 voicing. I love this, it's such a beautiful voicing. And then we go to this, which I would consider an A major add 9. We've seen this before in other songs. I know it's in Tullio and other songs. Then you move this voicing up to C sharp minor 7 flat 5. Then you play the major, 7 voicing, played in B, but now you're barring with your first finger because you play this C sharp on top, which is the 9. So you really have a B major 9 here. This is what it sounds like. So this is what that whole section sounds like quickly. Then comes this weirdo kind of section. I believe it's actually in the C sharp half whole diminished scale, the C sharp diminished scale. I'll just talk about it, but also put like how Allan's playing it here, so you can visually see it. I'll describe it as best as I can. You play the C sharp, and then you hammer on with your pinky to the F, and then with your index, or well, for Allan, he's got the pick cupped in his first finger, his second and third finger, but with your other fingers, you play the 9th fret on the D string, and then also the 9th fret on the G string, so you have a B and an E here. Then you hammer on out of nowhere to the D on the 12th fret. And this also is a triplet feel, but the notes are grouped in 4, which also makes it a little unusual too. And then you play the you play the 9th fret on the G string, which is an E. Then you play the G sharp on the B string on the 9th fret. Then you hammer on from G sharp to A sharp with your middle finger. This is where it's different from how I play it to how Allan does it, because his fingers are longer. Oops. Then you play the high C sharp. Then Allan plays the A sharp, and with his middle finger moves the A sharp to B on the 12th fret, and then taps D with his first finger. I find that a little challenging, so what I do is I do a little cheat thing here. I play it the same way. But then what I do is with my first finger I tap the B flat on the G string to B, and then with my middle finger I tap the D. So you can kind of get the same result that way. Then while he's in this kind of like tapping mood, he actually frets the F sharp with his right index finger and then plays this sort of a weirdo chord, and it's unusual because you actually have two B notes in here. This is another unusual thing with Allan where he actually plays the same note twice. So then while he's fretting the F sharp with his first finger, he uses his thumb and plays this full chord, which I guess the best way to call it is a B flat minor major 13 chord. Then you take that whole same voicing and move that up a whole step. And while you're still fretting that F sharp on the top, and now I guess this would be a C sharp minor major 7, a C sharp minor major 13 I should say. Like that. That whole section from the beginning of the song is actually cut from the solo section. There's two other chords, but it starts from, it resumes from this part. So anyway, after those two minor major 13 chords, you play this B add 9 sus 4 chord, but you pull off the sus 4 to the minor third. So you actually have a minor add 9. then just like that B flat major add 9, you sort of fill out the rest of the chord, you arpeggiate it. So you play the 5th, the root, then you play a D major add 9. We've seen this voicing also, I believe, in on Merry-Go-Round. Then you play this, which is an actual it's an E diminished with a 9. You have an E, you have a B flat here, and you have a G, so that's your E diminished, but then you have an F sharp there. This doesn't quite belong, almost this whole section belongs to D major or E Dorian, but I believe he adds this note in here because it's the flat 5, and you know that you can add that flat 5 sound in as like a blues note. So I think that's how he's thinking of it as starting from this part. So this whole thing is basically in D major. So that was that E minor, obviously E diminished with the added 9, and then you play this, which is really tricky to play. I don't think Allan always nails this when he's playing it because it's so quick, but this is D major 7. We've also seen this same voicing in funnels. It's the same voicing, doesn't really get used that often, but it's played up here. And then right after this high chord, all the way up on the neck, you jump to this G major 7 sharp 5. Then you go back to that that sort of 7 flat 9 sound. You have a D7 flat 9 here. Simple, and I believe Allan's actually thinking of this as not as the diminished scale, and I'll explain why. So we started with this G major 7 sharp 5, D7 flat 9, but you play the full chord. Like you play the bottom 3 notes first, then you play the D, and then your pinky plays the F, like that, and then you go to A major 7 sharp 5. But then you take your pinky that's playing the sharp 5 and you move it to the 6 or the 13, like that. Now what's interesting with those two sections is Allan's actually treating it as an A major scale with the added flat 6. And if we think of A major, your 3 chord is C sharp minor 7 with a flat 9. And if you then make the C sharp have a major 3rd in it, which is an F, that's the sharp 5 or the flat 6 of A major scale. So that's what Allan's actually doing there. He's actually using that flat 6 in an intelligent way to play a chord that you would associate with another key or another scale. So Allan's actually playing this C sharp, this C sharp 7 flat 9. I might have said it wrong, but it's definitely C sharp because we have an F in there. Then it goes to that A major with the sharp 5, which is also F, and that F gets resolved to F sharp, which is the 6. So in that A major scale, the flat 6 is F, and then it goes to F sharp. So we see that both with these next two sections, the C sharp 7 flat 9 and the A major 7 sharp 5, which then goes to 13. Then that C major add 9 to the D minor 9 that we played earlier in the song now gets modulated up a half step. So now we have C sharp major add 9 to E flat minor 9 to E major add 9, using this G sharp as a pedal point, F sharp major add 9 to B flat 7 to A flat major, and then once again that pivot point you use D major and then play the G sharp on the top. Yeah, a lot of chords. So I'm going to play through that as best as I can so you get an idea of how that whole thing should sound in context. There you go. Barely passable, my thumb's killing me. So now, if you've got that part down, the rest of the song is going to be much easier. So from the next few sections, I'm just going to talk about where those sections, when they repeat, and how they're different. Alright, so like I said, if you got through that last part, the solo chords are really not going to be that bad. That A flat, major 7, sharp 11 section has been omitted, and there's only 2 chords in its place, although that one chord is really tricky. And Allan also on the record does something a little bit different, where he doesn't play any of the chords fully on the top 4 strings. If that chord contained a note on the high E string, he just didn't play it. So anyway, this is what the solo chords sound like, or the solo harmony. So now, just omitting that top E string. Same repeat. This is where it starts to add the high E string in there. Then, like I said, instead of that A flat major 7 sharp 11, you go to G major add 9 add sharp 11, same chord as the beginning of this section. But then you take your first finger that's barring and you move that down a half step, and now you have an F sharp minor with an add 11. This is a weird voicing for that, but I think it makes sense because after this chord it goes to the B add 9 sus4 section. So it looks like this. And then the rest of the song is exactly the same as we just did. And now when Allan's soloing, it only takes one repeat. That's it. And then goes to the next section. So that part that preceded it, that full solo chord section, gets repeated again the same way, but has a little bit of a different ending, because then it takes a little bit of a twist to actually finish the song. So after the solo, the chords repeat the same exact way, but only for that first half, because then during the second half it kind of ventures off into something new, which is really just a variation of the full band intro. So I'll talk about where it changes, but it starts off the same way with the G major add 9 add sharp 11 voicing. So everything's the same, then the modulation up a half step. And then that modulation a half step down. This is where it's a little bit different. Instead of that E7 flat 9 section being played for 4 beats, this time it's 2 beats. And then it repeats the A major 7 sus2 section. And then instead of playing the E7 flat 9, goes right into the A flat major 7 sharp 11 part. All the same, then does the same tapping section, but there's just one note added at the end. Then Allan taps a high G. Of course, like I said, with him, he's only tapping the D and the G because his middle finger is moving from this B flat to B flat to B, and then from there goes to A major add 9. So now we're back to the full band reprise. Sorry for the interruption. Quick edit here. After this little section, Allan plays a minor 9. There you go. back to the original video. Then the add 11 motif again in F, so it goes from F to C add 11. But now instead of that major 7, it goes to an F sus4. Add 11 motif on B flat to F, but it's very fast, it's just that. And then it's C to G add 11. Then from there, this D minor 7 flat 5 chord. Sometimes Allan does play the F on the top, but like on the Tokyo video, but I actually prefer it without the F. Then from there is this little simple C major section, C major 7, B minor 7 flat 5, and then a little change here. Allan plays A flat major 7 sharp 5 chord, and then that similar voicing moves up to, now you can call this a C major add 9, but I'm going to call it an E minor 7 sharp 5 chord because of the same voicing configuration, having the root on the D string. Now from here there's a little bit of a change because now we go into the outro section, the swell chords, which is actually a variation of the intro part. So I'm going to talk about that here. So first I'm just going to play through the chords and talk about them, and then I'll use the swell thing so you can hear it a little bit better. It's really hard to tell on the record, but during the ringing out of that E minor 7 sharp 5 chord, Allan then moves his first finger down to E flat, then you have the E flat major 13, like that. Then G major add 9. Now this section sort of repeats as from the I think second or third chord of the very intro. Because then he goes to the F with the 7 sharp 11. Everything exactly the same. Even with the tap, D major 7. A major add 9, A major add 11. This is where it's different. After this chord, Allan then plays an E minor add E minor 11, which we did not see earlier in the section. I mean. Then from here, really cool thing I like that he does here. He plays the G major add 9, but then he bars his first finger and plays a C sharp on the top. So now this is a G major add 9 add sharp 11, and then he does the same thing down in E. He plays the E major add 9. Oops. But then he plays the open E as well as barring the 6th fret, having the A sharp on the top. Such a beautiful chord. And that's the whole outro. Sometimes live that outro is a little bit different, once again because he's playing by himself, but that's how it is on the record. So now I'm going to switch the tone, so I'm going to use the swell thing I've programmed in my Kemper, and you'll hear how it sounds. That's it. Like I said, a lot of chords in this song, but I hope you learned something, and for those of you advanced players that can play it, awesome, because it's a beautiful song. It's just a lot. There aren't really many songs that Allan wrote that I think are like this, and like I said, it's so tough because of all the stretches and all the variations and all the different chords, but it's beautiful, and that's really the hallmark of a great writer, is making something this complicated that doesn't sound that complicated. So, I hope you enjoy the lesson, and I'll see you guys soon.